Hi, Kristi.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
Good.
We're talking with Kristi Byers, Kristi Byers Architect. The firm is headquartered in Southern California. Their design sensibilities lean towards the modern and minimal with site-appropriate responses and the smart use of materials. They work with clients on a variety of project types that range from the adaptive reuse of historic buildings to authoring design guidelines for international industrial parks to helping cannabis clients navigate complex state and local licensing, design, and construction requirements, to serving as sustainability guide for LEED Platinum office buildings. They enjoy the collaborations that each new client and project brings and pride themselves in their listening skills and their abilities to build strong teams to accomplish their clients' goals. Thank you. So how are you handling work from home in your office now that we're like almost a year into it? Yeah.
Now, when you put it that way, well, now it seems normal. And we started really early because I had been listening to the news and international news. So in early February, I had told the team, I had told my office manager, like, hey, can you just order us some wipes and some hand sanitizer and some masks just in case this becomes anything? And then I told my architectural staff, I'm like, let's start thinking about if we had to work from home, the tools that we would need, start thinking about your work from home areas. And one of my staff thought I was crazy. He's like, what is going on with you? Like, this is not going to happen. This isn't going to become anything. So we had started thinking about it early. And so we were able to transition pretty quickly because, I was concerned about the staff being healthy and their families being healthy. So I didn't want anything to happen. But a lot of our projects were deemed essential. So we couldn't skip a beat. I mean, we had to just be able to transition and keep working.
Yeah.
So there were some struggles at first, like half the staff was in situations where they could easily work from home. Mm-hmm. And the other half were in tougher home situations. They just had never planned to work from home. So we've had our kind of struggles here and there, but we've really gotten into a groove. So we've been using GoTo and Slack, and I love the adjustments that have happened in the industry, being able to submit plans digitally, moving away from a lot of meetings, because before COVID, I'd be running all over town, driving to meetings, oftentimes that, could have been handled in an email or a phone call.
Yeah.
And so I love the reduction in meetings and the ability to kind of work from anywhere, because architecture was never like that before.
Yeah.
But it'll be curious to see how we go back, because I do miss seeing my team and, working side by side. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that we'll ever go back to a place where like everybody has their own desk and we have a big conference room. I mean, I could see us doing some sort of splitting, like some days from home or coming together to work on deadlines, or coming together to meet.
Hybrid, like the hybrid learning thing, but a hybrid work situation. Yeah. Yeah.
Which
that's great. You guys started so early. That's like
yeah. But it is funny. Like, I sent one of my staff at one point to buy a laptop, like when it happened, and I said, okay, we're shutting down. So we had to buy a laptop for one of our staff members. And I said, this is just one thing that happened. I'm like, here's the thing. When you go to buy this, there probably aren't going to be that many. And he's like, what do you mean there aren't going to be that many? I'm like, no, this is a thing. Like, everybody's going to be out looking for laptops. And he called me from Best Buy or Office Max, and he's like, I can't believe it. There's only like 2 left. What do I do? I'm like, just buy it. So at the first they thought I was kind of crazy, because, everybody had kind of a different awareness level. But I thought, just in case, let's just get prepared. So, but we're doing okay. And because so many of our clients were deemed essential in their projects, we've stayed super busy. So.
Uh-huh. So what were the essential? Were the cannabis facilities essential, or they are essential? Okay. Okay,
Cannabis was deemed
medical
essential.
marijuana. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But even so,
Yeah.
even for I mean, they didn't distinguish between medical cannabis and recreational cannabis, which
Okay.
is so interesting because, you know, recreational was only legalized not that long ago, but that was deemed essential. We were at the time working on an agricultural building, and so agriculture was deemed essential. Certainly housing was
Yeah.
deemed essential. And then we were also working on some sustainability certifications with a design build team for the military. And so those were deemed essential. And so we had a fair amount of projects that just kept moving.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. Great. I know. I think that like people are kind of like, oh, are we going to shut down? Are we not going to shut down? And then I was like wondering, like, I mean, when I was going to the building department, right? I'm like, am I essential? I thought I was essential, but I mean, just as far as housing, right? Because you're like housing or houses, is it all the same thing? I mean, and I mean that, everybody was still doing the housing projects downtown and everything that I saw. So it was like I wasn't, quite sure like what, so I just kept I mean, I always work out of the house, but I think that that's kind of the thing, people were saying, oh, you've always worked out of the house, so it's no different. I'm like, yeah, but I could leave the house, right? And nobody was at home with me in the house all the time, so that definitely changed like the dynamics of things when you're, when you do have, like even, I mean, the boys are older, but, and then my daughter was, is working, but now she's going to school too. But she was the boys like with their Zoom calls, right? So it's like I'm doing one thing over here, and then you kind of forget that they're on with their class, right? And then one of my kids is like, my teacher muted me because you were yelling in the background. I'm like, oh my God, like, why didn't you?
Oh,
like, why didn't you? Yeah. And I said, yeah. I said, but by the way, I said, because it was art history, I said, by the way, she's wrong on several of the things that she's been saying in her lectures.
get loud about something, and it's actually about the content of the subject matter. Yeah, things could get interesting.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I think that the not being able to leave, it's, at first it was interesting because we were trying to figure everything out. But then I did go through moments because my days were so diverse, because I'm running to this meeting and out to this construction site, and then I'm sitting in a conference room with my staff. And so I had all of this like interesting, interaction and movement. And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting at a desk on video, and that is not my style. I'm even a pacer. Like when I talk on the phone, when I'm talking to
me too, totally, Kristi. I'm walking like all through the house or whatever when I'm like talking on the, yeah, no, that was the thing. I was like, oh my gosh, now I feel like I have to be in the house, but I wasn't in the house. I mean, I was out, right? That was one of the things that I didn't like having to work in an office where I'm like in the office at a table the whole time. I mean, where it's like when you have your own firm and you're like out, seeing clients and then coming back or going to the job site or like going to the building department, or, you're going to see all, you're going out and you're doing all of these things. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh my gosh, like I can't,
Yeah, I was just sitting at a desk. So I had to kind of adjust that. Like we have a mailbox now that all of our business mail goes to. So I'll go walk down there in the middle of the day, or, I'll eat lunch outside, just to try to even get a different view, outside of my desk and my computer. So, but all in, it's been okay. We've been doing okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like you made a good transition. I mean, you guys were you were on the ball with that. Yeah. So, what are your first recollections of experiencing architecture?
So I didn't really discover architecture because I had traveled a lot as a kid or seen a lot of interesting buildings. I grew up in relatively small towns. So born in Eugene, Oregon, and then we moved to Arizona to a small town like of 12,000 people when I was 9. So my introduction was more on the construction side. So my dad was a subcontractor. He's an excavation contractor. My mom and dad ran the company together. And so I was always out, like on the weekends, either helping him with, kind of scoping the site or putting water down so that he wouldn't have dust issues. And then our hometown had been in a boom for several years. I mean, over these decades, it's now got like 65,000 people. So it's grown substantially. So there was always houses under construction. And so my parents were always taking us into houses, or we'd go to like get firewood. My mom always has a fire lit, in the winter. And so I was exposed to it that way, but I played outside a ton, both in Oregon and Arizona. And it was all about like kind of picking up things from the desert. And I was always going in and dragging my dad's tools out of the garage. He never said anything. He was always very gracious about it, and then hammering things together and whatnot. So then I went into a drafting class in high school that was very trade oriented. It wasn't kind of big A architecture oriented, but it was very intense. We had a great instructor, and you had a dress code, and he introduced us to AutoCAD and computers in 1990. So we started in AutoCAD. So that was really my introduction. And when I went to college, I remember after they weeded us down from like 150 down to 50 for our second year in our 5-year program. We were sitting around in our studios, and the instructor had said, the crit had said, what do you want to design? And I remember I said houses, and everybody kind of chuckled because that's really all I knew from my hometown. But so I didn't start getting exposed to architecture in the big sense until I got to college. And then my mind just like opened way up. But I've always been grateful for the start in construction because I ended up working construction in college as a grunt, like on several different crews. And then throughout my career, I've always been able to walk on a construction site or talk to a sub. I don't think they anticipate that I've had those experiences, but at least I feel comfortable going into them. So that was my introduction.
Yeah. I think that sometimes they're kind of, I think they're sometimes kind of surprised. And then, because I kind of had my family was in construction too. And so I think it's always kind of, also I think that we can converse, and like probably like, if something is said to us, we can easily like say something back, which I think that, maybe that kind of hits them like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah, I think it catches folks off guard, and what's interesting is, I have embraced architecture and it courses through my veins, and I mostly, wear dark colors, and I wear the glasses, and I love art museums and everything that comes along with architecture. But at my core, I grew up with contractors and subcontractors, so they don't know it. But when I walk in, I'm like, those are my people. These are the folks that I went to high school with. These were all my parents' friends, so that they just don't know that. I walk in and, my all black and, my kind of intimidating, maybe black boots or whatever. And I think they make an assumption, but then, if they really knew, it's like, no, these were the folks that I was like, hanging out with growing up and, at home for summers and everything. So again, that's another reason why some like younger architects, when I'll talk to students or, will come up to me and say, how do you feel comfortable on construction sites? And I'm always telling them, just go ask, just go get a job in the summer, just like find somebody. And it wasn't until, just a few years ago that I was thinking, well, it's a little unfair for me to say, just go approach the contractor and ask for a job, because I had all of these connections that got me in. My dad new contractors, and he'd say, oh, my daughter's coming home for the summer. Do you need a grunt laborer just so she can have some exposure? And it gave me enough experience and confidence that then I could go in college. I did my work study in the wood and metal labs. I worked for a contractor who was just starting out. So I'm super grateful for that, because I think a lot of architects and get really intimidated with that contractor interaction and construction.
I think it's kind of, I think it's kind of fun. Like the contractors that I've worked with have pretty much always been, kind of very embracing of like women in architecture. And they've even, like, if one of the subs will say something, like they'll step in and say, like, don't talk to her like that if they are gonna like say something. And also I think one of my contractors said, he was telling one of my clients, he goes, well, before I used Michelle for because we were doing a spec home, he goes, any of the architects that I've ever used before, he goes, have never come out to the job site. And I said, well, maybe something in their services. Who knows? He goes, but I said, when the contractor's building that, right, he's the owner builder, so he's like doing it, right? It's like, I really don't have to go out that much for him, because he's going to be picking a lot of the stuff in that, in that kind of arrangement. But I want to go just to learn how everything works and learn how things, so it's not just, when I'm drawing a detail, I'm going to be able to say, okay, that's what it looks like in the field, that's how I'm going to draw it, and it's so much easier for you to like draw something if you know what it really looks like, right?
Right. And then to grow from that and refine, throughout your career. So you look at it and you're like, okay, that turned out okay, but next time I'm doing this particular detail, I'm gonna.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, it's totally worth it.
Yeah, even on my own house, like I was like, why didn't I do this? So, now I'm having the same contractor that I was talking about before. He's, I'm like, okay, I think, like, let's redo this part. Let's redo this part. Like, I wanted the opening this high. I wanted it to come down like here. So, it's right. Like the architect's house is never done. I don't know whether we'll ever have baseboards or anything on the inside. I want to do this drywall detail, so like when he installed the door, he goes, oh, what trim, do you want me to put the trim in? I'm like, oh no, because we're not doing trim. Like there's this drywall detail I wanted. He just like looks at me like, what? Like just put trim on it. Like just get it done. Put the trim on it. Just get it done.
I know what drywall detail you're talking about. That is so beautiful. Fight for it. Fight for that detail.
Well, that's what I'm gonna do. I've asked Michael Falonis so many times for it. He just like says, it's just this. And I'm like, no, can you just send me the detail? Can you just send me the detail so I can explain it to the person that's going to be doing it? I just want to be able to explain to the drywaller, I want to have a drawing and like hand it to them and just have them. I don't want to, be like, oh, it's like this, it's like, it's because it won't turn out right. Yeah.
And then you'll have to stare at that detail every day. In your own house, especially working from home, you won't be able to escape that detail.
Yeah, well, I already did. I have no it's just corner bead on the French doors, and I just have like there's no trim at all on that. But that's fine. That's the one I have to look. It's the bathroom door in the master that's like the one that for a while there was no door, and then finally put in the door. But
one thing at a
time. I know. So what are 3 classic buildings that you like and why?
So I've got one building that I have a connection to that I'll speak to, and then I guess I'd rather talk about typologies maybe that I like, but
yeah, no, it's fine. People have done that before. Yeah.
Okay, so the classic building that I love is Renzo Piano's Mingei Museum in Houston, Texas, which has the little curving light scoops. And I had the opportunity to actually work on that building. So I've always been a Renzo Piano fan.
Uh-huh.
And then, I was working at a firm called Studio Red that had expanded into San Diego. But when we hit the recession, Houston stayed busy. And so the other partner here and I were going back and forth to Houston. So I would get in early and I would go to the Menil campus because they've got like the Rothko Chapel
Mhm.
and the Cy Twombly Museum. There's a whole lot going on there. So I would walk around and, kind of experience the architecture. And then the firm got the commission to design the re-roof of the building. And it was sensitive because it's got these really thin roof edges, but with all the new building department requirements, we had to add insulation. We could no longer put in, there had been rocks on the roof and we couldn't do that because of the hurricane code restrictions. And so, so I got to go into the building a lot. I got to go behind the scenes. They stayed open while we were constructing it. So I got to be on the roof. I got to know, the facilities folks there. So I have this connection to it. So that will always probably be my favorite classic building because I've gotten to spend so much time in it and then had a tiny little part of like touching it and kind of keeping it, I guess, safe and the art safe.
Do you have photos of it?
Do I have photos of it?
Yeah. When you were working on it?
Yeah.
Okay, so send me those so that I can put them in, because I like different photos than the typical ones that everybody sees, right, on the, kind of the classic shots. Like there was, yeah.
Yeah, some of them are actually pretty boring because I'm standing on the roof and you have no idea where you are, and it's these rainy Houston days.
No, like, that's still good. Yeah.
I'll send you one of those, and then I've got a couple that I took there, where I'm like walking past some of the curving arches. So yeah, I'll send you a couple. So yeah, I love that building, and I was going to Houston quite often, but I was still consulting with them sometimes, and they were helping us on some projects, but we're not so much anymore. So I'm kind of itching to get back, if nothing else, than to just visit that building.
Yeah, I mean, the museum thing has really like hurt me, of not being able to go to a museum, but because it's typically like everywhere I go, any city that I go to, I'll always go to a museum. I mean, now we can't go anywhere, and so it's like I'm like, well, I guess I could just I can like kind of like look at I'll go on Instagram the different museums that they'll go through. And then I think it did open up a little bit in September. So I went with my youngest for his birthday. We just went to the San Diego Museum of Art and like walked around. So they were open, they only let so many people in. You had to, take your temperature to your hands and everything. And then we went in and then we did go to that cafe that was outside, and then then we went home, and then everything shut down again.
So I didn't even know about that window. I'm so sad because I'm the same way. So when I go to the city, especially if I'm there for a conference or a wedding or whatever it happens to be, same thing, I'll usually seek out the Contemporary Art Museum. So like I love the Broad up in LA. Renzo Piano did an addition to, I think it was the Art Institute in Chicago. I love that building, but same thing. I love the art, and then also just the natural light, and of course, how much care and money goes into those sorts of structures. They're just beautiful. So same, I miss that. In fact, a bunch of, from the art side, a bunch of my college architecture friends, we had planned a trip to Marfa in March before COVID hit. And so just again, to kind of experience the Donald Judd property and kind of the art of the city, and that got canceled. So yeah, that has left a hole, like not being able to go experience art, openings for shows and that sort of thing. So I feel you there for sure.
I mean, LPA is doing they're the architect of record for the Museum of Contemporary Art in La Jolla. And so
Mhm.
I've asked Wendy, I want her to get us in there to do a free tour. So it's the one that Annabelle Seldorf is doing. So she's the
Oh,
design architect. Yes. So she's the design architect. And then, yeah, and then LPA is the architect. So I like told her, I'm like, Wendy, I need to get in there. So like, see,
can you please keep me on that list, please?
I
No,
know.
I would love to do that tour.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
as far as the other, because it was really hard for me to narrow this down. So the Menil is
Hard for
obvious because
everybody. Yeah. And like that's the thing. Like I think Bob Borson had kind of said like, oh, if I say three things now, it might be different in a year. And I'm like, yeah, but it's like there's a date on the thing, so you can revise it or whatever if you want to after. Yeah.
yeah, that's true. Like it's one of the reasons I've never gotten a tattoo because I'm so curious and my ideas are always changing that I know if I'd gotten one when I was 18, I'd look at it now and be like, man, I'm not into whatever that is anymore.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I guess the other thing are kind of like building typologies. I love like what the Rural Studio has done over the years and what Sam Mockbee started with, making incredible architectural space that benefits community with found objects, donated objects, and doing, so much with so little. And I when like going to the Valle de Guadalupe, like a lot of the wineries are doing that sort of thing where they're repurposing elements from kind of the wine process and the agricultural process into canopies and
Mhm.
all of that sort of stuff. So I love that sort of architecture as well, which is, of course, two extremes. Museums where there's so much focus on detail and there's much higher budgets. And then in contrast to that, I love seeing, really those tactile places where folks get really creative with a little. And then the last thing I was going to say was adaptive reuse. And we get into a fair amount of this where it's, going into buildings and kind of peeling back all the layers that have been added over the years and determining what should stay, what should be celebrated, and then how carefully just like surgically implant the new technology so that it works
Yeah.
for modern inhabitants. So we've done a fair amount of like mid-century modern renovations to homes, and then we're trying to make them livable for, again, modern families. But I've always been blown away by like what those architects were doing at the time, like some of the things they were trying with major spans and materials that I don't feel like we get that opportunity as much. We kind of have a palette of materials and everything's always moving so quickly and there's always a budget. And so I'm always just so excited to be able to go in and try to figure out, okay, what was this architect thinking? And again, just trying to pull out those elements that are worth, saving and highlighting. So when adaptive reuse is successfully done, it's one of my favorite things.
Yeah. That's why we need to do more work design build, because then we will have the time to kind of get more into those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just rare. And the other thing is the fight, because a lot of times we'll kind of get brought into things where, especially on the commercial side, somebody's gotten a hold of this building and they're trying to do something fast and inexpensive. And I'm like, whoa, 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 put the brakes down. And it's amazing how many times, a developer or, kind of a spec office person has said, well, couldn't we just get some of that brick stuff and stick it to the side of this? So we're in a building with all this incredible texture and fabric. And I'm like, no. And it's those fights to say, trust me on this. Like, don't bring in something fake. We're going to highlight whatever it is, this old concrete wall or this old CMU wall. Like, it'll be all right. But there's, those things don't just happen. They just don't roll out and look okay. There's a lot of like thought that goes in, a lot of negotiation with, building owners and tenants and the city as well when it comes to ADA and fire and a lot of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So when I see a good adaptive reuse building, I get pretty excited.
Yeah. And I think there's so much story, there's so much of a story then to be told in the design, and not so much that it's like, okay, this, we're just totally ripping everything out and like redoing it and this becomes this, and then there kind of isn't any kind of like history to it or whatever, as far as like what kind of, what the building was, what the building is now, what the building might be in the future. And I like the contrast. I mean, I always like the old and the new, and I mean, in Europe they do more of that, and maybe in like other areas where kind of the history is kind of more, and I mean, and in places in downtown LA, I mean, I mean, we still do some of it here, but a lot of stuff just isn't protected, so it just doesn't get used. Instead, it's just like demoed. Right?
Right, which is why, even though I'm very much a modernist, I've come to appreciate, like you're saying, the history and just even the craftsmanship, boiling down to like when you peel something back, you realize just even the brickwork, or maybe an old wood floor. I think that's why it's worth fighting for even more in a place like San Diego, where we just don't have very much of it. And I'm not a believer that just because a building's old, it's worth saving necessarily, because there's a lot of stuff that's just been, over the years, it's just had too much of its character removed, or it wasn't, very good to begin with, or, whatever, it won't shed water, it takes in water or whatever. So I don't necessarily believe every building should be saved, but I think it's worth examining each one to determine, like, is this something you can keep? Because we also don't utilize a lot of those materials anymore. And there's a reason why, especially when you go to towns and it's like big boxville and like everything is absolutely looking the same. So we should grab on to our history and then respond to it too, so putting modern things next to the historic and inserting modern things so that they're, having a conversation, we certainly duplicate it. But we should keep what we have when it's of value to the city.
And I mean, there's a big difference, even even if they're saying like, oh, we're using traditional town planning. I'm like, yeah, but you can tell that the buildings are all new. It's like there's something that's different about looking at a downtown that has been there for a while, and then different pieces have been replaced, or there's new in some and old in others. Then there's a different look for it than kind of like this pastiche of like, like, oh, well, this is supposed to be old, right? Then you can do that at Disneyland, right? But it just it doesn't look the same. The character isn't the same, and kind of like the whole, that's more stage set, and not like the real history and the building of that.
And then I think too, there's also some grit, that goes along with that history about what had happened in that building, and that again, you don't get in a brand new development when everything's super shiny. So when you're in an urban environment and you're going by the new shiny buildings versus, something that's had a little bit of life to it. And so I think that's what's great about cities and the old and the new as well, is that, not everything is absolutely vanilla and polished. There's this contrast between the old, the gritty, maybe kind of a little dirty, and the bright new and shiny.
Yeah. And that's why, I don't like certain areas to the north of us. Not to get into which the areas those are, but but everything is. And then it's the scale, right? It's like these areas that have been, built kind of based on, car scale, right? It's like you're whipping by it, so there's no reason why it has to address the sidewalk, or why it has to be that you would be comfortable walking, past it, because, it's not, it was never designed for that, where if you've got the older, we've got older areas and older buildings, the scale is a different scale. And then right, and the properties were smaller, so the differentiation between the different projects, you don't have like an acre like something and then another acre. Yeah.
Right. Well, and the other thing, because we've worked on some projects before with like kind of mid-century like roadside architecture where like the buildings themselves kind of reached out to try to attract the cars. So I think that was a fun era when like the world was trying to grasp with the automobile and cars going by at 55 or 60 miles an hour. But somehow we lost that, so then the buildings again just kind of went to kind of a bland, could be anywhere USA, and they weren't even trying to talk to the cars, or the people going by. So
yeah. Here's to the future. And then even sustainability, like the sustainability back, I know that I talked to a friend, like, I don't know, years back, they were on this kind of like green committee. And I said, it was for green schools. And I said, well, isn't like the greenest school, like just reusing like the old schools? And then doing like, no, that's not the way it is. And blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay. I said, well, whatever. Well, now, of course, they're realizing that all these schools that they built in the 80s are falling apart under the thing. But these schools that were built in like the 50s or before, it's like they're still, they're kind of the workhorse school where, it's like they're still being now, like even the way, you've got clear story lights and, it's like the whole open campus and everything. They're just holding up better. So it's better for them to like remodel some of these older campuses than like scrape the lot and like rebuild.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. The sustainability certifications have gotten a lot of criticism because, everybody was kind of working towards these points to achieve, like you're saying, whether it was energy efficiency or using certain products. But at the end of the day, if you're not grading raw land and you're not using all of those new resources to, adapt an old school. And the thing that I love about a lot of the old schools are these big windows, that go from like desk height up to like 12 or 20 feet. And I've had instructors tell me like, oh, well, it's distracting, for the kids because they're looking outside. And I'm thinking, well, frost the lower windows then and bring in a lot of like filtered natural light, And
I
wonder too, I don't know if it comes down to just like the timing of bonds and whatnot, because it seems like there's either like brand new schools that are going in, but, I have over the years, because I've been involved in sustainability, since, I don't know, it's been like 15 years or so. So I've attended a lot of conferences and educated myself quite a bit. And so there's bad schools all over the US that, have horrible HVAC, bad ventilation, and I think COVID really threw a light on that, where now people are saying, now that we're sending kids back to school, we're going to need to upgrade these schools, so hopefully maybe that's a positive that comes out of all of this COVID, is that there'll be more of a kind of a broad brush that touches a lot more schools to, get rid of like old materials that are maybe affecting, the respiratory system and kind of redo the HVAC. So hopefully
open up the windows, it's like open up. I always went to school. I always went to school with like the elementary school that I first went to in Pittsburgh was like the same elementary school that my grandmother had gone to, like maybe K through 8. Yeah. So it was like it had marble stairs, and the marble, it was like dipped from like so many people walking up and down it. And now they don't even use it as school. Now it's like kind of the community center building that they have there. But it was a great school, but the windows were, super high, right? Because the classrooms were the ceilings were high. Yeah. And then they, but they're always, and I was always looking out the windows. I don't think I'm any, it's like I'm definitely not dumber because I'm looking out the windows.
good thing from a healthy business standpoint.
You know, if the teacher was more exciting, you wouldn't be looking out the windows. But I don't know. I think I would still be looking out the windows. I think it's,
Now,
yeah.
I would too. I'm a big looking out the window person. But the other thing is, as sustainable design has shifted from just being so focused on energy and water and is now getting more into healthy buildings, of course, now we're looking more at it from the user experience. So it's absolutely healthy to be able to look out a window and see nature on the other side or movement or something out in the distance. So hopefully that will overpower the occasional teacher that says, no, they're not paying attention, you know?
Yeah. We used to have one where we had the courtyard. We had our high school was built, and we had a planetarium in our high school. It was like, I don't know how we ended up. Yeah, I don't know how we ended up. I think that they don't even have it anymore, but it was there. And I mean, I can post some pictures of it and everything, but we had these courtyards, but nobody was allowed to go out into the courtyards, right? Because it was like built in the 60s. So it's like you had the courtyards, and then we had the pivot windows, but then they had the shades inside. Well, of course, the shades like would always break, so they would be like either stuck shut. So then you would be in there, and you know, they couldn't open up the shades, right? All the shades would be shut, and then we would open up the windows, like. But you know, I mean, it was Pittsburgh, so it was cold out there. But you know, and then the little like slit windows on the sides of the doors. You know, right. Always like laughing, like how, you know, it's like I always call those prison windows. One of my clients got this super heavy stainless steel door, and then it has this like window slit. And I like the project, but that door, I just call it the prison door. It's super heavy. It has like this really big door handle on it.
When it closes, it sounds like a cell door locking. Wow.
Yeah. It's just so big, and then with this little narrow window. But you know, let them pick the front door, right? then you can just Photoshop it out if you don't like. Oh, it's fine. I don't Photoshop that door. It's fine. I mean, it goes with the house, but it's just funny. To me, it just reminds me of like a prison. Because it wasn't the door. I picked like this one. I just wanted this one of the pivot. I just wanted a pivot French door of just the whole thing. But of course, I think it was like $5,000. Okay, so what do you like about being an architect?
So first of all, I love being an architect. It's a difficult road, you know, I mean, and I've talked to a lot of students. I was just talking to some high school students on a Zoom call because they weren't able to do internships. Yeah. And so they were inviting folks in to speak. And so I'm very careful to tell folks, like, it is not a profession for the faint of heart, but I'm now at a point like 22 years in where I'm like, no, I really love architecture. I mean, I wake up every morning excited to start my day, but for so many reasons. Like, on the one hand, what we do, I think, is really fun, but it also can have really major impacts on, you know, to help our clients, to help society. I'm always trying to tell clients, like, look, you've hired us and you're paying us, but as architects, you know, the community at large and society at large are also our clients because of health, safety, and welfare, and how it affects, you know, the community around it, how it meets the sky, what people are always going to have to look at. So there's that part of it. But I love how many different people I get to work with. I mean, we kind of touched on this earlier, but like, every client is different, and, you know, we do a fair amount of entitlement work. So I'll be presenting to city councils or community planning groups. And then the next day I'll be out meeting with a subcontractor, you know? Yeah. So I get, and then the other thing that I like about it is kind of the expansion and contraction. So I'm a curious person. So I love being challenged, but having to step out and look at the big picture and the big idea. And then we're working on so many different projects at once, and I'm working with different staff on things. Then I'll have to contract way down and focus on a detail about how a material is going to look in the micro. And so I love that. And I love that I'm never bored.
Yeah.
So, and not even just with the profession, but like I can be sitting in the DMV waiting for something, and I'll be studying, you know, the window detailing or how they did the ceiling or what's going on with the millwork. And, you know, we talk like when you drop into cities and you will go check out the art museum. I can go just about anywhere, and, you know, I drop off my bags at the hotel and then I immediately just go out walking into the city. So, you know, it's something that keeps my mind active, and, you know, yeah. So I love architecture for all of those reasons.
Do you think I could pause it or not? Do you think it pauses or?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. So what would you like to say about the future of architecture?
So I think about this almost every day because, you know, I also, in addition to being an architect, I own a firm. So I'm always thinking about, you know, how to keep us working and, you know, what's coming down the pipeline. And I feel like I've got two major thoughts on this. And one is that with all of the problems facing the world right now, I think that architects are primed to be leaders in solving a lot of these issues. I mean, just starting with the fact that, I mean, the fact that we have no consensus as a country right now. I mean, it's, you know, black and white. People are on one side or the other. And we as architects have to bring together people. Sometimes it's a lot of folks who have interest in a project, you know, whether it's, you know, the folks that are going to be using it, the person financing it, the city staff approving it, city officials, the community, and, you know, take all of these differing opinions and different agendas, and then at the end come through with a project that at least makes everybody that's the benefit of everybody, even if everybody quite happy. But so I think we are used to leading in those situations. And so I think what's tricky, and so that's one example, but when it comes to, you know, better quality of life for more people in America and the world, again, when it comes to how buildings and cities can be improved and how things can be more walkable, again, we're perfectly suited for that. When it comes to climate change, you know, I mean, we've been working on this as a profession for a really long time.
Years and years, like even the 70s, the 60s or the 70s, but yeah.
And so I think what's tricky with that is that, again, there's still this perception, I think, by a lot of the public that as architects, you know, when they think of an architect, they probably think of, you know, somebody dressed in like really fancy clothes that goes to a lot of parties and drives a nice car and says nice things, you know, or interesting things, you know, but in reality, we're really this diverse group, you know, that have a lot of skill sets. And so it's a matter of architects, you know, showing up and helping to create those opportunities, because I'm not sure the folks that are leading these efforts are necessarily going to say, you know, who we really need on this team, we really need an architect. So I think some of that is education, but I think it's, in some ways, it's just showing up and being part of the conversation. And you're very, I mean, obviously you're very good at that, right? Because you're very much a citizen architect, having served on a planning, all the things you do for, like, you know, residential architecture. And so, I mean, I know who I'm talking to here, but I think some of that is just showing up and being part of the conversation, both in the work that we're hired to do and then in the community.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, I always like say like, oh, as a planning commissioner, like with the real contentious things, if nobody was happy with my decision, then I probably made the right, the right call. If I try to like, okay, do you think you could do this? Or, I mean, my daughter calls it the architect's 50 shades of gray, but I like, she like just talks about how we have so many gray colors. But it's like, I think that like the architect's 50 shades of gray is like more as far as like, okay, we can come to the table and we can show you, something that's melding everybody's ideas so that we can present you with a solution that's going to hopefully make everybody happy, but yeah. But I know.
The other thing too is that, I think buildings and just the process that you have to go through with different municipalities and the building code, municipal codes, overlapping jurisdictions, it's gotten so complicated. And especially with really smart technology intense buildings. Again, I think architects are poised to take all of that information and all of, this equipment and all these different parties now that come to the table in order to get a building done. Again, I think we're in a good spot to be leading that effort, to be taking, because again, as architects, we don't have to be experts in IT and low voltage and specialty process equipment, but we are good at getting enough information in order to be able to design spaces and buildings around them. So I think in those ways, I think it's very bright, the future for architects. I will say on the other side of that, a few years ago, design became something important for everyone, which was great, so when it's the Home and Garden network and, everybody was able to have a Pinterest page, and certainly with Instagram and social media, like everyone started to take this interest in design. And what's interesting is I have this hashtag I'll sometimes use where like hashtag everyone's an architect these days, or hashtags everyone's a designer these days, where, and frankly, a lot of people have entered the space that, are like tastemakers or designers that can really put together beautiful, maybe homes or retail experiences, when I'll say interiors and that sort of stuff. And so we've seen in architecture over the decades where certain portions of architecture kind of get pulled away. We saw this in residential construction, right? Where it used to be most people would go talk to an architect. But now with the way that, subdivisions occurred and whatnot, most of the time it's contractor driven. So I see that sort of happening in the design world, where again, if we show up as architects and give our fees because we really know what it's going to take to, for instance, pick out all the fixtures and finishes for a house, and they're like, well, shoot, we could call up this other person to do that. So I kind of feel that eating away at architecture, and we don't, at our firm, we don't necessarily try to compete with that. It's like we do get some fun design projects, and we kind of put it out there when we can, but we're also doing a lot of really technology intense industrial buildings and commercial buildings. And so I see that being a place where only so many people can do that, because of the training and experience that we have. And so we gravitate towards those projects quite often.
Yeah, I mean, I get, it's funny because even like in residential now, people are like, well, you're gonna, they're kind of surprised that we'll pick the finishes, but then they feel, I think, like by the time they get to that space, they're like, oh, we can do it. But the thing is that, it's like if we're designing the space, we want to be able to like, we had a vision for the finishes that we want to use, and then to have somebody like, oh, well, we didn't, it's like, well, I'm just going to go with my girlfriend and go pick out, because she did her kitchen before, I mean, it's like like, okay, or like so it's like, well, what, I mean, can I come along? Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of, I mean, in that, and then you're like, well, I mean, then you kind of feel like you have to say, okay, well, now, it's like, oh, well, it's like, well, her friend picked it or whatever. I mean, so, some of the stuff, but I mean, I do kind of, you know, because I mean, yeah, anybody can go in or say, oh, this is like Pinterest, this is something that I want on Pinterest, and that's kind of like, okay, that's their vision, right? That's their vision. But then we can like take it and make it theirs, so it's like, okay, you can look at this on Pinterest, right? And that's kind of the idea that you want, but we'll take that idea of like what you want and turn it into something that's unique to your house. So it's not, we're not copying this and like putting it in your house. And I think that kind of like design and like specialty for them, I mean, that's like what, it's like we're designing for you, these are your ideas that you have, and we're helping you create, something that's just for you. And I think we kind of get lost in that because, they're like, well, why can't I, it's like, I'll just have, Pottery Barn or something do my, do it, like, oh, Pottery Barn said that they could put stuff together. And I'm like, yeah, but, that person from Pottery Barn, not knocking Pottery Barn, but, or anything from those, it's like those, it's like seeing that this person that they're hiring, from that probably just applied or whatever, is all of a sudden now this designer, when we have all of these years of experience and like we have a certain idea of the way, things should be. And typically I think what happened, I mean, with one project, I was working on, it's kind of the owner's rep, she picked things, but then she said afterwards, like all of the things that I had said, well, maybe we'll do this. She goes, no, you were absolutely right on every single thing that you said that we should. And I'm like, well, I'm glad that you're telling me that I was right on that one. But the thing is that now it's built this way. So it's like, yeah.
I think too, when we first start working with a client, and especially with a residential client, and I'm sure you do this as well, we spend time getting to know them, and we go to the house that they currently live in, and what is working for your house, what isn't working for the house. We learn about their existing pieces and what colors they like, and again, we talk a lot about hopes and dreams, and that gets confirmed and refined as we're working through schematic design and design development and the details. And what's interesting is then at the end for somebody to come in and be like, oh yeah, like even when if they'll go to a Home Depot designer, like you're saying, a Pottery Barn designer, that is not somebody, in a lot of cases, sometimes those folks never even go to the house and aren't having those detailed discussions, with all of the involved parties. So I understand, that there can be this disconnect. So we love to be part of that when we can. But the other thing, I've had this recently with our commercial clients, where we've started doing a lot of entitlements. And again, that touches another part of the architect's brain, because we're working intensely with the cities, and we're, again, working with the community, and we're trying to get things approved. And then with those clients, when we finally get their projects to the end game, and I'm like, okay, and now we're going to start designing the interiors, they're like, whoa, you're an architect. Shouldn't we like call up an interior designer or a interior decorator? And the thing is, when I worked at Carrier Johnson, I worked in a big architecture house where we had, trained interior designers, and we would all come together on complicated projects. And and some of my best friends are these, commercial interior designers that do amazing things. But, when it comes to a small retail shop or doing a single family home or, an adaptive reuse on a building, I've had to pull out my phone, multiple times in the last few years when we've been doing all these entitlements to say, no, we do this too. Like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Yeah, we do this too. We have a lot of different skill sets,
Yeah.
So.
And I think I've actually like been putting down like interiors now, just so that people like understand, okay, and then they're like, okay, will you help us with everything? I mean, yes, I will help you with everything. I mean, I can help you pick your furniture if you want to, I mean, we're always,
Yeah.
we lay out furniture in the room anyway, so it's like, oh, okay, it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm designing this with the furniture, this, I mean, we're thinking about how you're going to be using the space when when we design these things. I mean, that's like part of the thing. So
Right.
that, yeah, yeah. So, okay, is there anything else that you want to say?
No, this has been very enjoyable. I always like chatting with
Thank
you.
Kristi. Thank you. I'm glad. I always try to make it. I mean, I know that sometimes people are like, "Oh my gosh, what type of questions, do you have to, what kind of question?" I said they're the same 4 questions, except if you're a fellow, then you get like the 5th question of why did you decide, why did you apply for fellowship and what is the category that you were in or whatever. But yeah,
Yeah.
as painless as possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I've listened to quite a few of them. And yeah, I find the fellow question very interesting because I've been on the fellowship committee before with AIA San Diego. And then I've written letters of recommendation before, and it is such an interesting achievement. But I've had folks before say you should well, yeah, folks who I have a tremendous amount of respect for in the industry say you should go for your fellowship, and it's like, man, I still feel like I'm just learning every single day. Like I'm not ready for fellowship. It's give me another 30 years at
No,
this, and then
no. I think you know what? I
try.
think it's more. It's like the people that have done it. I mean, like these people that were, they're like highly acclaimed architects, and then they're like, oh yeah, they kicked back my fellowship form, and I was like, oh my god. I mean,
Right.
like seriously, like that person was like kicked back, but meanwhile there's like these other people that I mean, I don't feel, I mean, it's just funny, like what kind of, it just kind of depends on who, and I mean, well, Bob like applied the first time, and I mean, he's put this in his blog, so it's not like but anyway, I think it was because, oh my gosh, what was the word he used a word. It's not like, I don't know. I mean, it's not like really like a really bad swear word or something. But anyway, it was like something in it, and the person like kicked it back, and they said, yeah, we don't want it because you used like that word in like blog 133,
Wow.
you know. And so he said, well, I'm not going to change it. So I'm not going to change it. So he just reapplied the next year, right? Because most of the time people are recommended, right? You're recommended by somebody even before you start the process.
Right.
And I think it's more, I mean, for him, he just said like, it was just such a incredibly like intense process of like putting everything together. And then, Marvin Malika was saying, these big firms, there's people that they have on staff that will help you write all of this, right? So it's like the sole
Right.
proprietor, the small firm that like doesn't have somebody that's there to kind of like write all of the information and everything. It's more, and I mean, Rosa Chang, right? It's like she got hers kicked back, and that was after she designed the Apple.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like, what if you're like, yeah, because she had put it in the wrong category. She had tried to straddle a category instead of like picking one or the other, right? So it's like they're like, okay, you're back, you got to redo it. And I don't know, for that, it's just, and I know a couple other people, they've said like after they submitted it the first time and it was like no, they're just like no. I don't
Well,
have like 10 years. I don't have 10 years that I've been in it yet as an architect. I've only have like 4 or something. So, and I'm not going to do this at 60. So I'm not, I'm not gonna, even if I'm not going to.
well, the other hard thing is it's like, I feel like I've had a pretty diverse career so far, and I'm interested in a whole bunch of things. And I forgot who you were talking to, but I was listening to one of your interviews where like you were talking about the categories, and it's so true because, for a good portion of my profession, it was very much about mentoring because that's how I started in AIA. I started with the mentoring committee and then kind of worked my way up, and then I've taught and I've helped write exams over the years. But then on the other hand, I've had this very technical and design oriented career. So it's how do you even boil that down? And when I look at the folks that have fellowship, I just think, in most cases, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're so accomplished. I can't throw my hat into that ring. It's just, it's a good feather in the cap, and I'm so proud of the fellows that get it done. But yeah, it'll be a while if I do decide to.
I think you should do it. And then you're past AIA San Diego president. I think it's a shoe-in, really. So that's my take on it. The fellowship committee decides to ask me, I will say yes. You should be. You shouldn't be a fellow, as it's like even that, right? The fellow.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I very clearly not a fellow, but I guess we're in a fellow's profession still. So anyway,
it's called the mastermind or something, right? It's like you should get your mastermindship or something. Then we just call it something else totally.
We're superstar expert. I like that.
Expert.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you get a big star, right?
Yes, your lapel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it. Let's start this in our spare time.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Kristi. Thank you.
Yes. Michelle, take care.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, I'm here with Kristi Byers of Kristi Byers Architect. I'm interviewing her for the San Diego Design Week. We're here at the Mingei in Balboa Park, if you hear any background noise. And Kristi, I want to know what inspires your work in architecture.
Hi, Michelle. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
In person.
Yeah, in person.
I take in inspiration from everywhere. And I don't know that would have been my answer to you 20 years ago. I probably would have had something that was pretty calculated, but I'm a very curious personality. And ever since I was a little kid, I take in my environment. Mm-hmm. So I love being out in nature because of the macro with, mountains and vistas, but also the micro and being able to look at, a flower, a mushroom, or the colors on an insect. Mm-hmm. I love travel to the places that all architects love, mm-hmm. like Europe and cities. But I also love small town Americana. Mm-hmm. I love going to developing countries and seeing how folks live. That informs a lot of the simpler parts of my design aesthetic, where oftentimes we're trying to reduce or take things away and approach things out of, necessity and delight, and not necessarily cover things with a lot of frosting. Mm-hmm. I love things from the Industrial Revolution. I was just coming down the coast and saw an old bridge, I think from the 1920s, and looking at when people were really pushing the envelope, which is why I love mid-century modern architecture, when they were cantilevering farther than they probably should have, mm-hmm. doing flat roofs that were probably flatter than they should have. But when folks are really kind of pushing that edge, and I think architecture and construction used to be a lot more forgiving mm-hmm. before we had the litigation that we have now.
Yeah. And I mean, we just didn't have the technology for a lot of those things, in order to put it, where now we do have that technology with different types of materials that we can now, cover, right? We can waterproof things better than we did before.
Right.
We have paralams. We can go from bigger, farther,
correct,
faster.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm always inspired with folks who kind of do with what they have, mm-hmm. in like even vernacular architecture. And then one other thing beyond the experiences in the built environment is people inspire mm-hmm. me. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you realize it's totally different when you're working with a client who's extremely passionate mm-hmm. about what they're trying to do, and they're bringing a lot to the table. And so I feed off that energy quite a bit.
Yeah.
It kind of makes the job easier when somebody's showing up with ideas and what they're doing is interesting and they have, they're throwing their own life at something. I can design for those folks all day long.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what about, I mean, we had kind of talked a little bit before about how that was impacted by COVID as far as inspiration and creativity and.
Right. I put up a good fight, but I definitely fell into a creative depression, I would say, because we were all working from home and everything was on Zoom. So I wasn't with my team, the team being my staff and clients and engineers. We just weren't having that kind of brainstorming effort, but also just being out in the world, and taking in materials or even, we're sitting outside right now and the sun's starting to set, and I love what's happening with the quality of light and the shade and shadows, and sort of being stuck at home alone and working. I just wasn't getting that much stimulation. And so I went into a void for a while, and then I had to find other ways to find inspiration. So I went back to one of my childhood loves. I started reading fiction, which I read a ton when I was growing up, but ever since college, I've been very much a nonfiction, like, okay, this must be serving a purpose and must be filling me with knowledge about being a better architect or a better business owner or something like that. So I read a lot about like historical fiction, dystopian fiction, really helped me out. Where there was really descriptive environments. I started cooking things I wouldn't normally have cooked, and I was photographing my food, plating things.
Yes, yeah. Oh, no, exactly. Yeah.
I planted things. I planted milkweed, and I would watch, the monarch butterflies come, and I started really paying attention to my house plants. I started getting more into film, which I've always loved, but I kind of stayed clear of it because I can get kind of sucked in. So I was watching film. So, there's all this other tertiary stuff too that we were missing, right?
Yeah. Like
going out to really good restaurants or going to museums. Yeah. I mean, besides just not being amongst our creative friends and colleagues, I was missing out on a lot of that as well. Yeah. So in hindsight, I guess it was a good thing in that now, hopefully, when I'm in a period, perhaps when I don't have access to this external stimulation, maybe I'll be able to tap into that kind of alternative method for getting inspiration.
Yeah. But I can remember what they opened up the San Diego Museum of Art for a couple weeks or something like that. There was just that short window, that small window of time when we could actually go. I think I told you about it. Yeah. And then we went for my one son's birthday, I think. And then I think we went to eat at, was it Panama 66? Yeah. Yeah. And but being able to go, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like how much I've missed going to a museum, And I mean when we went to that opening at the Museum of Contemporary Art, I mean it was like a big thing. I mean you
such
could just
a party.
tell.
Everybody was so happy and so excited. Everybody we saw.
Yeah.
And something else about inspiration I just wanted to mention is that I am always taking things in from my environment, whether it's trying new foods or running around looking and touching all the things. That what I've learned over time is I do have to shut off my brain because especially in college and in my 20s, when I was working a ton, the brain was kind of always going. And I think at that time, you're learning so much. I mean, especially when I was in my early and mid 20s and working on these really big projects at a more corporate firm, I was just always kind of thinking to the point of insomnia. And so I have to do yoga or take the dog for a walk or exhaust myself hiking or taking a Peloton ride. It's almost like a brain cleanse so that I can kind of focus. But like I had mentioned earlier, I do think all these things I'm taking in, it's definitely not linear. Mm-hmm. I don't see something and say, oh, that's how we'll fix this problem we're having on a project.
Yeah.
I know my subconscious is working on what I've observed because I'll wake up in the morning with a solution to some design problem I've been dealing with.
Yeah.
You know.
So we almost have to ferment all of the information before we can.
I love that word.
phase.
Yeah, I love that word. Yeah, it has to kind of all kind of tie together and kind of do its thing a little bit. And sometimes it is a little bit linear, right? You'll be out and about, you're like, that's the color that I was thinking of that I couldn't put my finger on. But yeah, so I have to go inward and kind of shut it all down to be able to then, you know, I guess release the creativity from everything I've taken.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Is there anything else? Anything else that you wanted to say about how I guess we weren't going to do how your inspiration motivates you, or we kind of covered that.
Yeah. I am grateful that I have a curious mind. Like, I don't know how I'd be an architect without it.
Yeah.
And you meet people sometimes, right, that don't get that.
Yeah.
You know, or my inquisitiveness has annoyed some folks, you know, because I love traveling and talking to people where they live and whatever it is they're doing, whether they're a farmer or they work in the cafe that I keep getting espresso at, or you know, I love the conversation and learning how people live.
Yeah.
So so that, I guess, in adulthood, my older adulthood, I just also make sure that I am surrounding myself with people who fuel that inspiration, who are creatives themselves and who are open to my inspiration gathering and creativity.
And I mean that way you're getting a lot of different viewpoints in order to create architecture that is for everyone and not just maybe for a select group of people.
Right.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Always nice chatting with you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Kristi.